You know you need fiber for a healthy gut, but do you actually know how to get it? Quaker's been serving up fiber since 1877, with over 100 great-tasting, good source of fiber options to choose from. Whether you like old-fashioned oats, instant oatmeal, granola, or oatmeal squares, Quaker makes it delicious. So good. Get your fiber with Quaker. Shop Quaker's good source of fiber products at a store near you.
Hello and welcome to O Behave. I'm your host, Brian Middleton, also known as the Bearded Behaviorist. Today we have Rich Scott coming on. He is a behavior analyst and owner of Compass Therapeutic Services out of the East Bay of Northern California. And today we're going to be talking about behavior analyst responsibility to clients. Topic E-2 on the BACB's Task List 5th edition. Welcome, Rich. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. You're making me want to change the name to just Compass. The therapeutic is too hard to say. I think it's hard to say and it's hard to spell.
I have all sorts of stumbles and things like that. I stumble over words a lot and don't realize it. When I get really excited, I kind of do that. So, but it comes with all sorts of fun consequences. Like, for example, one time I was playing a game of D&D with some friends, and I stumbled over the word cockroach and said crockroach. That resulted in us creating this amazing monster that was half cockroach, half crocodile, and was the terror of the next 5 or 6 campaigns.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is.
I'll tell you quickly, I've got a 10-year-old son, and when he was growing up, we were reading to him. We read to him every night. And I was reading this new book from the library, and I came to this word that I couldn't figure out how to pronounce it. And so I didn't know what it was, and I just said crotcheted because I sounded it out. And my wife's next to me, and she's like, that word's crocheted. And maybe I hadn't ever seen crocheted, but it's always been crotcheted now for me. So I've got the same thing.
Well, that's also, I think, a French word, and those French words really mess me up. Like, for the longest time, I thought faux was pronounced fox because nobody had ever taught me that, in the UX is O.
Yeah.
So, I had fox fur, for the longest time, and people were like, "Isn't that cruel?" And I'm like, "It's fake."
It's faux fox fur.
So, there you go. All right. So to start with, this is a hard topic and a fun topic of the behavior analyst's responsibility to our clients. This is really crucial. And I'm glad that you chose this topic because this links in nicely to something that's near and dear to your heart and mine, which is trauma-informed care. So how in your way of looking at it, how do you define trauma-informed care?
Well, it's just, so for me, and I always felt like, so I wanted to go into clinical psychology. I was going to be a child psychologist.
Okay.
That's what I wanted. And so sometimes, if I'm honest, I feel like a child psychologist moonlighting as a BCBA, kind of like I have both sides to me. And so with the trauma, there's part of it is I'm watching the client's behavior and I'm looking for signs of discomfort, and keeping in mind that everybody will show that in different ways. So I'm not just looking for tantruming or eloping. They can be really, really subtle. And so that's why I think pairing is so important, because I won't be able to find out the trauma unless I really get to know the client typically. And so I need that time to learn about them and for them to feel comfortable with me And it's just, putting them in situations over and over again that are aversive to them, I don't want to do. And for me, that's trauma. Even if you have, like, one example, somebody that I work with was starting a session when the client's school was stopping. And so the teacher wanted her to write the letter A. And our client can write the letter A. So the teacher said, write the letter A. Our client didn't do it. Teacher asked again. The client didn't do it. And I feel like previously, if that was in an ABA session, then we would have started in with maybe a gesture prompt, but a physical prompt probably of some kind. And that person could have found that really aversive. And the teacher, I was really impressed because she said she knew that our client liked ice cream. So instead of saying write the letter A, she said write ice cream. And sure enough, right away, ice cream, and contains the letter A, right? So part of the trauma-informed care is finding different ways to get the behavior that you want out of the client without having to resort to things that, we could have done a full physical and had her write the letter A, but that's going to be traumatic for her, potentially. And so thinking outside the box, I think, and being able to find different ways to get to the endpoint that you want, to me, that's a pretty important aspect of trauma-informed care.
Well, and to add to that, something that actually happened today for me. I'm a program, as of right now, August 28th, I'm a program coordinator for my center, which means that I am working directly under the supervision of the BCBA, and I am not a BCBA, but I'm receiving direct supervision, and I'm being trusted as a behavior analyst in training to create programs and then get approval for them before activating them and that sort of thing. So I did that process. And one of the clients that I'm working with, he is non-vocal. He does not speak. But we're focusing on functional communication. So we're worrying about the sign language. And that's been kind of fun because we have one person who is very knowledgeable in sign language in the center, but the rest of us are learning. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to make it so that we can learn with the client and we can keep track of which signs are being learned and all this other stuff. So I came up with a pretty nifty way of doing that. So that way, not only we learn the signs, but the signs that are being learned are being sent home and communicated with parents so that they can also practice the signs at home. And so I was demonstrating and showing the RBTs that I was responsible for how to do that. And the client was right there enjoying a break. And I looked up after explaining to them, and he was staring right at me. And I was like, hey, how about we demonstrate that? And so I said to the client, hey, buddy, can you show me the sign for in? And this client, sometimes he'll just stare at you and not do anything or say anything. And so I tried prompting a couple more times after with the appropriate amount of waiting. And then I was like, you know what? This client responds a lot to silliness and having fun. So I said, hey, buddy, if you can do in, I will be silly. And immediately in. And I just go, do a Muppet thing, run into the wall, goof around. And I turn around and guess what he does again? As soon as I turn around, in. I'm like, all right, well, hey, this is a great contingency. I can do this. So I kept on doing it. And I did it 3 more times. And I'm like, okay, I'm all done. And then he did in. And he looked at one of the therapists. And the therapist is like, okay. And so he spun backwards and turned around in his chair and fell off the chair. And just that sort of thing where the process of learning is, instead of it being challenging or aversive, it's instead interesting or fun or enjoyable. Now to contrast that, sometimes we have to deal with aversive. Like if you have a sensitive, like with me, I'm sensitive to high temperatures. Have a very hard time tolerating heat. At least initially I did, but then I started practicing tolerance training for myself. Sometimes we have clients who have a hard time tolerating doing what's asked, even if it's good for them. Like, drinking water. Like, not drinking enough water is going to give you headaches, cause all sorts of problems. This is a client actually I dealt with where he would drink maybe 40 ounces of water in a day, if he was lucky, and that was including the water from his food. So it was a rough guesstimate. And so this client had tons of headache problems, tons of digestive issues. And it's like, okay, so how can we make this, less aversive? And there's just going to be a component of learning how to tolerate that. Doing it as kindly as possible, I think, is really important.
Yes.
And as understandingly as possible. And of course, sneak nutrition in the case of the water. we were okay with Mios and Kool-Aid. Because we wanted to get him to the point where he could drink it. And now, as of the last time that I heard from parents, he's been drinking enough water to avoid those headaches and those digestive issues.
Good. And that's when it's important, like the whole team is on the same page. And like I wouldn't want to work on the client drinking water only during an ABA session. And then outside of that, he doesn't have to drink water. But even with that, so that's personal for me because I didn't used to like the taste of water and I still don't. And so it's finding different ways that you can get to that end goal. And so for me, it was like I love juice. So I just drank a lot of juice. And I said one day, okay, well, I'm going to fill up 90% of this glass with juice and then do 10% water. And over time, that amount of water got higher and higher. And now it's like 95% water and a splash of juice. And that tastes good to me. And if I had a full glass of juice, I couldn't drink it, like it's too much. And so remembering that, you're on a path to this end goal, and to go from 100% juice to 100% water right away was not going to be effective for me. But over time, like now, I've been doing this for probably 10 years, but looking back on it, like it was a tough transition to go even to that like 90 or 95% juice and a touch of water. And looking back on it, like that's amazing to me that tasted too watered down, but like I stuck with it and I saw the benefits. And so like for me, when I'm working with kids, whether or not they're showing me that they understand like why I'm doing a certain goal, I always want to tell not just the parents, but remember, like it's the kid that I'm working with. They're my ultimate client. So like I'll tell them, this is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. And hopefully that also helps with that's part of trauma-informed care to me, is like, I'm giving you at least a rationale for why this is part of your program. So it's, it's not just something possibly random. There is a point to it. There's a purpose.
Well, and that dovetails neatly into one of the other topics that we wanted to cover, which is us trying to provide effective treatment because our clients have a right to that effective treatment.
Yes.
And that sounds to me like one of those ideas of including the client wherever and however much possible we can in that process. I tend to work with all age groups with my company, Keystone Achievements. And so it's kind of more obvious to do when you're working with a teenager or even a young adult. But I'll actually give an example here. So one of my coworkers, Hanley, I'm sorry, Hanley, if I'm going to embarrass you, buddy, but he is so great at including kids in the process. And for example, the client I mentioned is a young adult is nonverbal, and we're working on the sign language. And whenever Hanley is talking to this client, he is saying, I want you to be able to be an adult, and I want you to have that independence. And so what we're doing here is we're trying to figure out how you can get those skills so that you can be independent and so you can make your own choices. And like, there's been more than one time when I've had to duck out because I'm just like, this is killing me. This is so awesome. Because, about to tear up. But the same thing can be true for any client of any verbal level or any skill level or age level. Because I've worked with a 4-year-old, highly verbal 4-year-old, and pretty decent at advocating for himself when he was not under a lot of stress. And there was a lot of trauma in this poor kid's past, which is awful for the age of 4. But I would always be sure to engage him and say, hey buddy, this is what we're trying to do, and this is why we're doing it. I wouldn't hide stuff from him.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like that's one of the problems that we face is it's like this kind of hush hush. We don't talk about the goals around the kid. We're always talking in the other room, or when we're talking in code or something like that. When really, unless there's an actual behavioral reason to do that, we should probably be addressing the individual. And it's something I picked up from actually a mentor special ed teacher, because special ed teacher for 7 years, and it was early on in my training, and I sat in on an IEP meeting, and the teacher would look at the kid and say, okay, so this is the goal that we're doing. Let's say the kid's name was Susan. This is the goal we're doing, Susan, and this is why we're doing it. And then the mother would ask a question as if the Susan wasn't there, and so the special ed teacher would turn to the mother and say, well, I'm glad you asked that, Linda. So Susan here, the reason why we're including you in this, Susan, is because, it was the gentlest and kindest way of correcting and including the kid in the process, instead of just automatically assuming that they were incompetent.
Yeah. And it's really important, I think, what you're doing and getting these podcasts out there, because with COVID hitting, so I decided that we would have, with the people that I work with, once a month or once every 6 weeks, like, we'd invite a speaker on and do a Zoom with all of us. And the first one that we did was with a woman, Joy Johnson, out of Baltimore. And like, for me, I would always get down, kneel down, get on the kids' level. I'd talk to them with respect, but I didn't always take that extra step and explain what we were doing. And it was in her talk that she said, she would go in and start doing initial assessments with kids. And even if they couldn't verbally talk back to her, she would say, look, I have to ask you this group of questions. Some of them might seem too easy to you. I'm not doing it to demean you. I don't want to insult your intelligence. I'm just trying to figure out where you are. And that was like a light bulb moment for me that, okay, it's not, it's a good start to get on their level and to talk to them kindly, but there's much more that you can do. And so without hearing her say that, I don't know, when that would have come up. Just hopefully it would have come up eventually, but it was through that talk from her and her experience that not only do I do that now, but everybody that I work with had that same experience, and they're exposed to that thought that they might not have had on their own. And so we learned that from her. And now we can spread that same thing. And it sounds maybe like an obvious thing, but we hadn't thought of it before.
Well, sometimes the best ideas are seemingly obvious.
Yeah.
Like, this is a recent thing I read. Albert Einstein said that while his theory of relativity was his greatest contribution, greatest idea, his second greatest idea was that when he was making his stew or soup, he would boil his egg at the same time, so he had 2 meals for the cost of one when it came to effort.
Yeah.
And like it seems silly, but if you think about it, like that is a great idea. Why not boil an egg while cooking your stew, right?
And maybe it's a myth. But I always attribute it to him that he wore the same outfit every day, so he didn't have to think about what to wear. Like, I don't need to waste brain space on deciding what to wear if I wear the same thing every day.
I don't know if that one's true, but either way,
that's what I remember hearing.
I've heard that idea go around. I know quite a few people who do it because they're like, and I'm like, hey, cool, you're an anime character. Sounds good to me. Yeah. Okay, so along those lines, I think that Kitty Corner is beautifully into advocating for our students, because a part of advocacy is including them in that process. Yeah. I think a lot of times we get a little bit stuck on when it comes to advocating, thinking that we're advocating with the community, and that's not a bad idea. It's definitely a good one. But sometimes I find myself advocating for the students with parents because the parents are. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, sometimes parents get stuck in, this is my kid, so therefore they're my kid. And it's really difficult because you don't want to step on parents' toes, and you definitely don't want them to make them feel inferior, because that's an important relationship too. And if a relationship with parents is punishing, then we're doing everything wrong. But it's definitely a challenging dance that's very important that we have to do, of helping the parents see their child not just as their child, but as an autonomous individual who needs to be seen as their own person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for me, and maybe like there's a little extra weight on it. For me, I've walked into lots of homes when like I'll meet a parent for the first time, and just because you have like those letters BCBA after your name, like they'll tell you straight up, like, I trust you 100%, and like whatever you say goes. And I'm like, I want us to be a team, and that's great that you'll take my suggestions seriously, but like you shouldn't give me that much control or respect, without even knowing me first. Like, that's dangerous. And so I've had people, like, I've worked with kids when they get older and like they still love cartoons. And the parents are like, well, other kids that are 18 don't like cartoons. And I'm like, well, are you sure about that? Like, I'm 43 and I like cartoons. So, but to try, and so Joy Johnson also talked a lot about masking. And so that's been something that I've taken a lot more of an interest in. And so, I think parents sometimes want their kids to appear, normal, neurotypical. And so they're forced to like push all of their own likes aside in an attempt to appear just like everybody else, when like I'm sure that there's kids their own age that are totally into the things that they're into, but society's not telling them don't like cartoons or don't dress this way. And so I'm trying to advocate, like I can't control what somebody on the street thinks about the kids that I work with, but I can help at least advocate for the kids that I work with to their parents or caregivers, teachers. And so like I'm trying to start like as small or local as I can and help people see the kid instead of the diagnosis. And I've worked at a lot of preschools and daycare centers. And if my kid that I'm working with pushes somebody, oh, they did that because they're autistic.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other kid does the exact same thing. Oh, he's just 3.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's the same behavior, but that label is so pervasive, and like that's what I'm trying to overcome, and like get parents to see past that label and see the kid.
Yeah. And yeah, I was literally thinking the same thing when you started on this particular aspect of the topic, because that's one of the things that I observed as a special ed teacher, that I've observed as a behavior analyst, is that a lot of times when that label is present, while the label has its benefits of opening up services and kind of helping us understand those things, that can also get in the way.
Yeah.
And this is something I harp on. And if you've already heard me say this, great. And if you haven't heard me say this, then please listen closely. Behavior analysts should only care about DSM-5 diagnoses as far as it gives us a basic idea of how we can support our kids and where the funding sources are involved with being able to provide treatment. Anything beyond that, and we really shouldn't care. That's the purview of different fields. It's outside of our scope of practice for us to worry about whether or not they have reactive attachment disorder or oppositional defiance disorder or autism spectrum disorder or whatever thing that is a DSM-5 diagnosis, because that's all topographical. It's clusters of topographies that result in a diagnosis, and there's been multiple studies that have been done on this, and there's been a lot of discussion within all the fields that use DSM-5 for diagnoses of how unreliable DSM-5 diagnoses are, because a lot of it's up to opinion. And the beauty about behavior analysis is that we are a science of description. We are observing and describing what we're seeing. And when it comes to functions of behavior, that's what we should worry about. Is it one of the WTF? What's the function?
Yeah.
And we can break it down into the 4 basic functions, or we can even use the Saponian shock definitions for functions of behavior. So instead of it being, it could be attention and escape, we could say it's socially mediated escape. Those sorts of things. There's multiple ways of looking at it, but at the end of the day, the big thing is, what's the function? And we're addressing the function of the behavior and not worrying so much about whether the kid is autistic, which as an autistic adult is kind of a big deal for me. And that's I think part of the trauma-informed package, is saying I'm taking this individual as this individual, and that label is only for purposes of insurance. But as a person, this is a human. Like, that's the biggest label we should worry about. Human being. Yep. In fact, one of my favorite ways of greeting people is saying, "Hello, humans." It's very silly.
Yeah.
And it gets people's attention. It makes them laugh, and that's what I'm going for. But it's also at the heart of it. It's like, "Hello, humans. I'm looking at you. You are a person. You are an autonomous individual that deserves to be treated as such, instead of being assumed to be an attachment of another person."
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry.
Well said.
Rant done. But actually, that kind of roots into something that we were talking about before we started recording, which is so Eric. So just so you folks know, we're kind of bouncing all over the place, and this is great because I love this sort of conversation. But we're covering things that we're doing great. We're talking about things we're moving towards and things that we need to work on, and that aspect of what we just touched on is kind of the opinion monster that behavior analysts get stuck in. Is because predominantly right now what behavior analysis serves is autistic individuals, or individuals with autism spectrum disorder diagnoses, to be more specific. There's a lot of things that we have done in the past, and many companies and organizations do now, that are based off of opinion rather than off of data-driven stuff. What are your thoughts on that, Rich?
Yeah, and I'm thinking I'm proud of the field now that we're getting away. Is when I first started, it was if we work with somebody that flaps their hands or that jumps when they're excited, like, that's automatic. We're going to target that for reduction. And I think part of it was, like, the insurance companies want to see something, a behavior that's targeted for reduction in a treatment plan. But it's also an assumption that that's what we should do with those behaviors. And so that never felt right to me. So I didn't do that. I would just, as long as it wasn't hurting them, it wasn't hurting anybody else, flap away. Like, you can do that. And when I first started, it was a difficult conversation to have with the parents, because a lot of them just, like, that's what they wanted, was to get rid of the hand flapping. And so then we would sit down and have a conversation about why. And typically it was to have my kid appear to be like everybody else. And those were really difficult conversations to have with parents. And it used to, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and maybe I'm just meeting the right parent now, but it was kind of a long process. It was a struggle to get the parents to come over to kind of my way of thinking. And now it's all, maybe I've just gotten better at explaining it, but it's almost always, oh, that makes sense. Like, we'll let them go ahead and flap their hands. And I used to feel like, because if I talked about it with supervisors or with other people who were program supervisors, I didn't get a lot of support. Like, it felt like everybody was including that in their treatment plans, and I was the only one that wasn't. And so I felt like I was kind of on an island. And now I hear people that I really respect, like, if you talk about it, Justin Leaf was one person that I heard talk about it that did really, really great way of explaining it. And so now I feel like as a field, we're moving more towards that. And those old assumptions are kind of falling apart. And it, like, the kids are benefiting, the parents are benefiting. And so, like, all these old assumptions, I think as a field, we're getting away from them. And that's something that, like, there was always a part of me in the back of my mind that was like, when I hear about all these traumatic experiences that people have had with ABA, I was like, do I want to be a part of this? Like, I can do my own thing and provide services that I'm proud of and that I think are trauma informed. But if I'm in the minority in that, like, do I want to be associated with that field? And it seems like we're moving so far away from that now that, like, that piece in the back of my head is getting quieter and quieter. And so before I was like, should I even continue in the field? And now it's like, absolutely, I want to continue in the field, and this is my career, and I'm not going to change. But just having that feeling of other people kind of taking into account the clients more than they were before, I think has been a really huge step. And at least that's been my experience. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but I've noticed a pretty dramatic shift over the last couple of years.
I gotta say that, first off, I'm an ABA baby. I'm very young in this field. Special ed teacher, not so young, because I have quite a bit of experience under my belt. But when it comes to behavior analysis, I'm very young, and so I'm still learning a ton. And I'm grateful that you say you look up to me. But that's the one thing that I never had an issue with, is being able to say what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if anything, I had to learn how to kind of tone it down to
Yeah.
say what I'm thinking in the right setting so that people will be more receptive.
Yeah.
So it was a skill. It's not
Yeah.
masking. It's a skill of
Definitely.
find the right time to be able to make the biggest impact. But there have been a couple times where, and it's not happened often, thankfully, because every company I've worked for has utilized the trauma-informed approach, if not intentionally, then unintentionally.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been a couple times when, with the supervisor, they've said, "Well, this is a program that we're targeting," or they've added a program to the data tracking programs we have, and I've looked it over and I've waited for the right time to approach, and then I said, "Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Like, really, like, what's the reason behind it?" And there was really only one time that a program like that was explained to me where I agreed with it, because I found out that there was some self-injurious behavior components to it that we were trying to target. But surprisingly, because of my experience in the past, when a supervisor is challenged, their response is justification and punishment. But surprisingly, in every instance where I've challenged it, the supervisor's response was, "Huh, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Let's talk about this."
Yeah.
And it resulted in a better treatment package for the client, as a result of that. And in every instance, except for the one that I mentioned, which I don't want to go into details because that would potentially identify the individual that the services were for, and we got to follow those laws for privacy. But in every instance, except for that one, the result was a change. And in that one, it was for an appropriate reason, and we altered the treatment just slightly from the things that I brought up, because the supervisor had the goal, had the objective, but there was an area that needed a little bit of tweaking. And this has happened with me. So I'm responsible for creating programming and ensuring that it's being delivered effectively. And I've had supervisees come to me and say, "Hey, what's going on with this program?" And of course, because the behavior was modeled for me, I turn around and said, "Well, hey, what are you thinking?" And we talk it over and we come up with a better approach, and things improve.
Yeah. And
And
that's been really good. I'm lucky that I work with, like, now that I get to do the hiring, I get to choose who I want to work with. And, so every once in a while, I'll be at a session and somebody will say, like, "Can you show me how to run this?" Or, "Why did you write this?" And, like, sometimes you're just in the thick of it when you're writing it, and, like, it takes that fresh set of eyes to see it. And then, like, we can have that real collaboration. And it makes me so proud of the people that I work with, because they're not just seeing what's written on a page and, like, mindlessly, "Okay, this is what's written on the treatment plan, so I'll just go ahead and run it." Like, they're actually caring enough to say, like, "Why are we doing this?" And not everybody that runs the programs directly will do that. And so when that actually happens, and you can, because I'll be honest, and I don't do it hopefully nearly as much now as I used to, but if we had 5 kids who were between the ages of 3 and 4, and they had 20 goals each, a lot of them would look pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
And not each of them needed every one of those goals. But when you're just starting out, like, okay, I've been told if we've got 20 hours of service, I need 20 goals. There's just this, kind of trivial 1-to-1 ratio that we have to do.
Got to get those billables, right?
Yeah, you've got to get the billables. You've got to get insurance to approve the hours. And so it just seems silly, but, this person might not need these 3 goals that this other person definitely does.
Mm-hmm.
And you put it in there, and it's not until somebody calls you on it that you're like, "Oh, you know what? Like, we're going to take that out and either request less hours, or we'll request 20 hours with only 16 goals, or we can spend some extra time thinking about a different goal that we can replace that's more tailored to that individual. But I know it's kind of off tangent here, but I think it is, if you're going to talk about responsibility to clients, one of them is to have goals written for them that matter to them and that will make a difference in their life, not just a goal that you've copied and pasted from somebody else's program that happens to be the same age.
Yeah. Well, that actually dovetails perfectly into something we talked about that we need to work on, and that is the, as I put it, the data fudging monster, where we're, this is perfect. It's well, yeah, we didn't quite see that, so we're just going to assume that the kid needs this particular thing. So we're going to add this goal and see if and that's something that we're just going to run to justify the amount of time that we're spending with the client.
Yeah, and I've also seen it where, some kids that I work with struggle with pronouns, and so maybe they're not using he and she correctly, and maybe we've worked for 12 months on this goal, and I feel like they've really worked hard on it. And I'm using I, not me personally, but speaking for others, but, I think they've really tried hard. I think they know how to do it. They just might not be demonstrating it with me. So I'm going to give them credit for that and master it out. Or you can also have somebody say, we've worked on this for 12 months. I haven't seen the progress. I'm sick of running these trials with this kid. So I know if I fudge the data and I say they can do it independently, all of a sudden that goal gets mastered and it goes away. And you're not, then taking the extra step. Like, maybe you can put that goal on hold and bring it back, but maybe you're just not teaching it very effectively and you need to find a new way to do that. But I have seen, like, there's so many instances of the data fudging monster, and sometimes you get wrapped up in playing with a kid and you realize, oh, at the end of a session, I ran that half an hour ago. Can't quite remember if the kid actually got it independent or not, but I think they did. So I'm going to write, so the data are not always as accurate as they should be. And if we're a data-driven science, and the data tells us when to alter programs, when to master them out, to really stress, data collection is super, super critical. And it's not something that, is a plus or a minus on a page and then you can forget about it. So I try and stress to everybody I work with, like, you have to really take accurate data, do it as quickly as possible in the moment. But like, that data will affect how this kid's treatment plan goes from that day out. So, I've just seen it too many times where data are fudged. And the more that we can get away from doing that, I think the more ethical we're being and the better off our clients are.
Well, and to add to that, two thoughts on that. First one, to the most recent of the two things that were mentioned. One of the things that I've told the RBTs that I supervise and support and train is, those things happen, and if you're pairing with the kid and you've got a great pair and you can't get to the iPad to take the data, the priority is the pair and the instructional control. Record only the stuff that you are certain happened.
Yes.
Like it, and they're like, well, what if I thought that maybe this thing happened? And I'm like, are you sure? Are you 100%? Did you use some sort of mnemonic device to keep track of it? No? Okay, you're not certain, then don't record the data. That chalk that up to recording error. Unfortunately, but because it's better to err on the side of caution and not misrecord the information. So yeah, that's a piece of advice that I give my RBTs that work directly under me. The other piece, and I've checked with the clinical director, and she's okay with that. So, but my big emphasis is don't err my big emphasis is track the data as soon as you can, even if it means using your hand as a Palm Pilot and writing on the back of it. Like, do something to keep track of it, because that's better than not doing anything at all. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned it, is if a program instruction is not good, or a good quality one, or if you have to change the way that you're delivering instruction, that's the beauty of phase change lines. Is like, you don't have to place the program on hold if you can find a better way of instructing. You can do a phase change line and say new program instructions implemented, or staff training provided, that sort of thing. So that way you can see that, oh, we got more precise in how we approach things. Yeah. And I can think of at least 7 programs that I have just off the top of my head where that literally is a part of the process. And it was just something that a supervisor had mentioned, like, don't close the program. Don't put it on hold. Change your approach, and then keep tabs on that data, because that'll actually tell you a lot more about how effective the programming is based off of the data points that we take.
Yeah.
So
excellent points.
Okay, so some other things that we've mentioned that we're doing pretty good on. So following the laws of the land and the expectations there. I'm pretty sure that that's something we don't have to touch on too much. Just following HIPAA and FERPA, depending on whether we're educational or medical or both.
Yes.
I did hear, though, the other day that there's some movements in the in Congress to replace HIPAA with a new law. It's a HIPAA replacement. Yeah, there you go. My awful jokes. No, they're not really. It was just a bad joke with an even worse setup. So another thing that
I didn't watch enough C-SPAN today.
So continuing treatment and discontinuing services was another area that before the show had started that we had talked about. Before we hit that, because I might forget this one, because I think this one's really important. Consulting with other specialists and peers.
And so I know that's something that we don't often get as much of, at least I don't get as much of as I would like. But like, I've found that kids' teachers, OTs, PTs, speech therapists, maybe I've just been lucky, but they all want to be part of the collaboration, and they want to make sure that we're working on the same goals. And if we have reinforcers that are working for us that they're struggling with, I want to be able to share that information, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it in person, on Zoom, over email, telephone, whatever it is. Like, everybody seems to be, luckily, looking at it from wanting to get the best for the client. Mm-hmm. And so that collaboration piece, just realizing it's not just collaborating with parents, but we're not on this island, that this kid that we're working with outside of session time goes to school. They might go to OT, PT, speech, whatever it is. And the more that we can all be on the same page, I think the better it is for the kid. And so not to feel like what we do in session is the best way or the only way, but to give the other professionals the same respect that I'm going to give the client and the parents or the caregivers, because that really helps I think with the breadth of treatment, and I've learned a lot from collaborating with other professionals. And I think, if we're doing things effectively in our sessions, if we can bring that in to the other professional sessions, that, if I see a kid 20 hours a week, they might get him or her for 45 minutes a week. And so we're going to hopefully know this kid better, at least in the beginning, than they do. And so if I can help their sessions with the other professionals, then that's a really important piece for me to be able to do.
Yeah. Well, and to add to that, these other specialists, these other scientists have training in areas that we don't. Behavior analysis is very proud of, and rightfully so, verbal language. B.F. Skinner made some really amazing observations, and experimental analysis has verified quite a few of those, and corrected some of the ones that weren't quite on target, but were really close to on target, and those have resulted in some amazing developments, including relational frame theory, acceptance commitment therapy, those sorts of things. But one of the challenges that I see sometimes, thankfully not as often as I initially had seen it, but one of the challenges that I've seen sometimes is the assumption that, well, we do verbal behavior, so we're basically speech therapists. And that is a horrible assumption because speech therapists don't just learn about verbal behavior, they also learn about muscular behavior and soft tissue behavior and all the other behaviors that make them such wonderful specialists. And so, we can be, with all the good intentions of our hearts, trying to teach a kid how to speak and use, our mans and tacts and intraverbals and all the fun things that are going on there. But if our client is tongue-tied or has a soft palate issue, or maybe the muscles are not developed, those sorts of things, we need to talk with and collaborate with our peers. And what's more, they might have ideas that we don't have, because guess what? They're specialists. And just like we have to rule out medical, we should be also rule out medical and consulting with doctors and medical professionals. We should be considering our speech therapists, our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, a part of that suite of specialists that know what the heck they're doing, and we need to trust them and learn from them, and then offer support to them, because, like you mentioned, 45 minutes a week is kind of rough to get a lot of stuff done. So if we're talking to them and saying, hey, one of the things that we're working on is this sort of thing, we're trying to get them to ask for things more. What's something that is part of your programming that you would like us to do? We would love to track that data and run it. And if you please train us on how we should go about doing that. And then let's provide that data to you, so that way we're supporting you and making sure that you're delivering high quality services as well.
I've had parents, once they see the goals that we're working on, and when they are speech related, some of them will say, well, my speech therapist that's a 45-minute drive. You guys have it covered during session, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut them out of the schedule. And it's like, no. They do things that we are not trained in. So, then it becomes the parent or the caregiver is now the client, and you have to inform them of, these are the areas that the speech therapist was trained in that is out of my scope of competency, and do not take your child out of speech just because we work on manding and tax. And everybody has a role to play in this, and don't just assume that we can do it all because we work on speech and fine motor goals. That doesn't replace the OT and the SLP.
Yep. And that actually goes right into the continuing treatment and discontinuing services aspect of that, because COVID has added some challenges there.
Yes.
And one of the things, my center has managed to continue to stay open because we've been taking a lot of precautions. And one of the things that we've set up is, I'm sorry, no outside therapy can come in physically. And so before, when we had speech therapists and OTs and PTs coming in and delivering those services in center, and we were accommodating them, now we can't. But one of the ways that we've been accommodating them and is telehealth. And
Yeah.
it's been a bit of a sacrifice for our company, because like we have therapists who are getting paid for being there with the student, who are delivering or supporting the delivery of speech therapy and physical therapy and that sort of thing, and we can't bill for those hours.
Right.
And rightfully so, because that would be insurance fraud and that would be misrepresenting what we do and that sort of thing. And it has resulted in us having to tighten the belt a little bit, but that goes back to that, what this entire thing is making sure that we're providing quality services for our clients. And that has done wonders with building relationships for those therapists that we're working with, because now they see that, like, we're willing to put the money where our mouth is and say, like, yes, we have to protect the clients, so it's inconvenient for you because you're out in the community and we can't do these services the way that you normally would, but we're going to accommodate by providing that extra support elsewhere, so that way you can still get quality services.
Yeah. And I think we do see some kids in home, and we also do telehealth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's been, keeping with the trauma-informed care mantra. If we saw a kid in home, typically for a 2-hour session, and we started the telehealth thinking, let's just see how it goes. And typically it would start off, maybe they could last half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, we could get a good half hour. And then after that, it was not benefiting the client at all. And just because you were getting 2 hours in home, we're not going to stretch that out to 2 hours of telehealth when you only would benefit from half an hour. And so I think that's been helpful to the parents to see. And maybe it's just the way that I look at it, but if we were going to do the same 2-hour telehealth session that we would do in home, I'm prioritizing my reimbursement from insurance over your child's well-being and their program. And so by letting them know, like, I'm just going to do the best for your child that I can, and like, that's what's driving my decisions. It's not based on money, even though we do need to make money, but it's more about what is best for your kid. And I think that just helps build the relationship, not only with the kid, but also the parents and caregivers, even more than what was hopefully a strong connection before. Like, that just reinforces everything. And I will say that as a field, like, telehealth was not something that I ever did before and didn't have any experience with it. And it was definitely out of my comfort zone. It was out of the comfort zone of a lot of people that I work with, but they care so much about these kids that it was, bring it on. Like, if that's the way that I can see our kids, then that's what I'm going to do. And so, like, we started to find websites like boomlearning.com that, like, we were able to use really effectively. And then, like, we did use YouTube as a reinforcer for a lot of kids, but like, we made things up on the fly and really did a pretty amazing job of something that we didn't know what we were doing before. And I think, like, hearing about it on different Facebook groups and from different parents, former coworkers, friends, like, as a field, people have tried their best to keep services going, whether that be through telehealth or in person when it's appropriate. But like putting the kids first is something that, like, under really unfortunate circumstances, like that does kind of lift your spirits a little bit, that you've seen the way that we've tried to help the families that we serve and the kids that we serve. So, you know, the whole pandemic has been awful, but that is one thing that does, it's a bright spot in that.
Well, and I've noticed that crisis breeds innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely have to be innovative. And we also have to make sure that we're holding true to our core value as a science, which is the reason why we're here is to help others. And if we're not holding true to our core value, if we're instead valuing something else, or we're worried about the goal instead of the value, then we lose sight of that, and it's noticeable. And that's, I think, where the trauma aspects have come in, is like, when we move away from our values, when we're moving instead towards goals-driven thinking, that's when the problems happen. And you mentioning with regards to the 30 minutes versus 2 hours type thing, that reminded me of a video I watched early on in my learning about behavior analysis from Brett Denovi and Associates, where Brett Denovi was talking about how he had a choice of sticking up for a student and being truthful, or a major contract being lost. Those two things. So he had the option of, like, keep his mouth shut and keep the major contract, or say something and stand up for the kid. That was a little poorly worded initially, sorry. And he chose to stick up for the kid and lost that contract. And that created some lean times for him, but he always stuck with that value. And I feel like that needs to be us to a T, because if we move away from our code of ethics, even a little bit, if we allow ourselves to go into those gray areas and, well, you know, we can fudge it this time. It's the same thing with the data fudging monster. We lose our integrity, and if we can fudge this one place, then that means we can fudge in other places, and that results in not a fudge Sunday, but a fudging mess, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up, but there's one thing that we talked about before we started recording that I feel is important to hit, and that's an area that we definitely need to work on as a field, which is stopping services if the client requests that we stop. And this is a hard one. This is actually one that has some gray areas in it, and we need to ask the question of how, when, and why. So here's the easy answer for that. This is the easy one to address. When a teenager asks us to stop, because let's say they're higher in their self-advocacy skills, that sort of thing. And my company has had several instances where we've had teenagers request that they stop services, and what we've done as the trauma-informed aspect of that is sit down, talk with them, say, okay, so here's the goals, here's where we're going, very open with objectives and that sort of thing, making sure that they're always socially significant, and then saying, all right, so this is what we need to hit for you to be able to graduate to no longer need these services. What do you think? And there's a discussion involved, and sometimes there's even negotiation, and that's A-okay, because that's self-advocacy. And, you know, like, this is sometimes the individual's like, well, I don't think this goal is that important. And we're like, okay, I hear you, hear me out. Let me explain why we think this goal is important. And more often than not, the answer is, okay, I see where you're coming from. But sometimes the answer is, I don't see it. And it's like, okay, well, that's not valuable to you. So I guess we're not going to worry about that sort of thing. And that's kind of an easier solution when it comes to those kids, or if the parent has asked for stopping of services, then that's a little bit easier too. But what about those harder ones, like the little kid asking?
Yeah, and that's when I think you do have to take another hard look at the goals that you're working on with them, making sure you know the purpose of the goals, and then also like one of the best compliments anyway that I can hear or see is when I ring the doorbell and like I hear the kid running towards the door, not away from it. And so if all of a sudden I'm working with a client and they're showing me that this is aversive and they don't want to be involved in the sessions anymore, then going back to the pairing process, which should be a part of every session anyway, but going back to it. And so I don't think everybody feels the same way, but for me, I'm a believer that no matter how good a therapist is, like there are some kids that they're just not going to be a good fit with. Mm-hmm. And so I've worked at places before that the therapist leaving the team is not really an option, mm-hmm. or it's a very last resort. And so for me, if a therapist is in there and it's just not a good fit for whatever reason, if it's possible, I'm taking that therapist off the team and let's see if we bring somebody new in. If that changes, just changing the dynamic, we'll see if that makes therapy a little less aversive and more productive. But like if we're doing things that make me think that the child does not want to be a part of the session, then I'm going to scale things way back. I'm going to make sure that they're not harming themselves. Like I'll move in to the extent that I have to, but I'm going to reassess the goals. I'm going to focus on pairing, and I'm going to build that relationship back up, because I don't want the therapy to be aversive. Mm-hmm. Like it's the best for me when we're working on goals and we try and be as much as possible client-led. So if you like to watch cartoons, if you like to play with trains, we're going to let you do what you want to do. And my job and our job is to fit in working on goals around those activities, so you don't really know that we're working on them to some extent, And so if I'm letting you do the activities that you want to do, I'm giving you as much freedom as I can while still working on the goals, and you still don't want to be a part of that, then like I need to assess what I'm doing and make the changes that I can, and to make it so it's not as aversive. Yeah. To you. I'm trying to make it so the sessions are fun and we're doing things that you want to do. And like I feel for that 2 hours, like I'm going to try and teach you as much as I can, but I'm going to learn from you. And like I feel like to some extent you're letting me into your world for that 2 hours. And once you let me into that world, then like I'm not just an intruder in there. We can like coexist in that world, and we can learn from each other. And I think if you go into it with that kind of attitude, just a little aversiveness, you can work past.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to discontinue services when you throw a tantrum, like that's. Yeah. It's going to take something much more drastic than that to look at discontinuing services.
Yeah. Well, and to support that, so with my center, we do 4-hour sessions. The kids come to us. We're able to shape the environment a lot better. So there's a lot more play and pairing. It's if as I tell my people, if you're not pairing at least bare minimum 50% of the time, you're doing it wrong. And I'd rather you go closer to 75%. If you can sneak programs in, great, do it naturally. But this has to be fun and interesting. And there's actually a little girl that I've been helping the team with, and initially it was just I was called in whenever there was a problem, and behavior analyst analyzes, right? So I come in and I'm trying to identify what's going on, doing the ABC data, asking questions, trying to support, figuring out. And with this little girl, it is, you say yes, they say no. You say ice cream, they say go to hell. It is the textbook definition of oppositional defiance disorder for the DSM-5. And as a special ed teacher, I had oppositional defiant disorder kids and just never knew what to do with them. And with this little one, like now with the behavior analytic perspective, I don't have to be stuck by that paradigm. Those ODD, not scary to me because I was focusing on the function, and the function was attention and escape. And so with this little one, the important thing was focusing on getting out of the power struggle. And so we went for a walk around the center, and the little one wanted to ride in the wagon. So I was pulling the wagon, and then the little one said, I want to pull the wagon. She has a peer in the wagon. And the other therapists around me who have been around this little one before were like, no, just don't do it. No. and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I got a few side eye looks, but I'm like, okay, let's call this little one Amber. So I say, okay, Amber, you can pull the wagon, but I need to pull with you. And Amber goes, I don't want to. And I'm like, okay, then you can ride in the wagon. And then Amber's like, okay, you can pull with me. And we get out, right. It gets out of the wagon. Amber grabs the handle, and I'm just touching the handle. I'm not actually holding it. And Amber goes into tantrum mode of, I don't want you to pull with me. And I'm like, well, that's what we agreed on. And the other, and so Amber walks over to a little area that's landscaped and starts kicking the rocks. And I signal to the other therapist, just go, just keep going. Don't attend to it. And every single time that Amber's foot touched the ground, I said, that's great standing, Amber. Well done. And then every time that the rock was kicked, I just ignored it. And I'd say, Amber kicked the rocks again. I'd say, that's great standing. And then Amber would say, leave me alone. I'm like, I see that you're feeling frustrated, so I'm going to leave you alone for a little bit. And so I waited 10, 15 seconds, and Amber's stopped kicking. And I'm like, how are you feeling, Amber? I'm mad. Well, thanks for telling me how you're feeling. I appreciate you telling me that. Would you like to pull the wagon now? Yes, but I don't want you to pull with me. Well, we agreed that we're going to pull the wagon together, so you can get back in the wagon and I'll pull it for you. And then you can tell me how fast you want to go. And Amber thinks about it for a second and says, okay, we go fast. And I'm like, deal. Yeah. and it's getting them to be a part of it. And it's looking for anything that they're doing right. Even if that thing they're doing right is breathing or putting their foot down for 2 seconds or a half a second before they kick the rocks again. And that was breakthrough 1. And the therapist saw it. And there was a lot of people who were with other kids who were also on that team. And so they saw it. And this has also informed them with some of the other harder kids that we've worked with. And then after that, I said to the scheduling folks, put me on with this kid. I need to be on Amber's schedule at least 2 more times. I want people to see this is what we can do. And it was like by the end of the session, 4 hours, mind you, 4 hours. Okay. Yeah. I'm not a skinny guy. I'm working out though, so I'm working on that. But 4 4 hours of, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to go do that. And it was running back and forth and having fun and being high energy and getting deeply involved with everything. And anytime we had that little oppositional defiant thing, instead of worrying about that power struggle, just being like focusing on that one thing that we can work on. And by the end of that, the second session, Amber runs up to me and hugs me and says, I love you, Brian. And I'm like, well, I love you too, Amber. Thanks for being my friend.
And it's nice. I was thinking not everybody would do it that way. And it's nice because you gave it like time, I think, for the scenario to play out. And it wasn't, like you said, the power struggle. So, okay, like, you don't want to do this. I've given you the contingency. Like, if you want to push, I'll hold this with you. And if you want to go kick rocks, like, I'll let you do that. And having that, I mean, it comes with experience, I think, but also the confidence to know that this is the way, like, I want to treat you as a person. And in the end, I believe enough in our relationship and the science that this will eventually happen where we can do this together, and then you can be independent with that. But sometimes people panic, or they think, if I give you a demand, you have to comply within 3 seconds or within 5 seconds. And they don't give like the respect for the other person to choose not to follow your command, you know, and just to give that space and that time. I think it makes the kid feel more secure and more safe. And I've just seen it where people have tried to do it the other way, and 999 times out of 1,000, the rest of that session is just shot and it's worthless. And maybe you can come back from that the next day, but for sure that session is done. Like, nothing good is going to come from that. But if you're calm about it and you give them space and time, then the sessions seem to go much better, and you've got that really increased chance of success there. And so the way that you handled that was perfect, and I'm glad that other people were there to see, and you were a good model for that, because people need to see that you give the space and the time. You know, it doesn't have to be your way or the highway.
Yeah. Well, and to add to that, because me and some other behavior analysts just got done last week with Parent Training Week, and we've gotten some feedback on it, and there's some things that we can improve on. But one of the things that occurred to me, so I made a mistake in one of my posts where I had not mastered a concept, and I didn't double check myself before creating the post. And so I talked about the Premack principle, and I actually used a comparison to, I mixed it up with pairing with stimuli. So Premack principle is grandma's law, you know, first you do this, then we do that. And I mixed it up and used an example of broccoli and cheese, where you're pairing stimuli. So you're more likely to eat broccoli with cheese, that sort of thing. And somebody,
is that the one?
Yeah, that's the soda fountain one. Yeah. I had more than a few reactions on that one. Just like, whoa, oh, I can't believe you just made that. I'm like, it's okay. It worked. You're thinking about it now. But so I messed up on it, and somebody that I count as a friend, and that person instantaneously became a friend, even though I didn't know them before, because they corrected me in the kindest way possible. So your friends are the people who are able to correct you while being kind. So this person is now a friend. She reached out and said, hey, I think you messed up. And initially, my first initial response was, I didn't mess up. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, I did mess up. I'll double check myself. Okay, I got to fix it. So I went and I fixed it, and I fixed the description, and I made a better comparison, which was also, like, it still was the broccoli and cheese, but it was also true, which is my mom would say, first take a bite of broccoli, then if you still want it, you can add cheese, type thing. So still Premack principle, not quite as perfect. as say, first we do our chores, then we get ice cream, that sort of thing. But I fixed it. And then I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about every single situation where I've been with a client, a student, and I've messed up. And maybe this is one of my gifts or talents. Maybe it's just me being good at remembering the way I felt as a kid. But anytime an adult messed up and then they didn't say anything about it, that just made me mad and made me not respect them. Mm-hmm. And the very few times that I had an adult come to me and apologize made a big difference in my life, and it stuck with me. And so I make it a habit of, if I catch myself or somebody else catches me and corrects me with a mistake I make with the kid, that I go to the kid and I apologize. And I don't justify. I don't say, well, when you made this decision, I decided to make this and that was a mistake. I say, you know what? I lost my temper, or I did this thing wrong, or what I name with the thing that I did wrong. And I say, I am sorry. And I make sure that they know that I will do better. And sometimes that's the thing is, if an adult makes a mistake, and, even if we're not making a mistake, but maybe the kid perceives it that way, because that's creating an aversive, then that is a mistake, even if we don't like to admit that. And nothing repairs a pair better. Nothing repairs rapport better with a kid than saying, I screwed up, I'm going to do better, and then doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the key there, because you can apologize all day long, but what you're doing is teaching distrust if you don't actually do it.
Yeah.
And that is so important for parents, for teachers, for behavior analysts of the RBT, BACB, or BCBA variety. Doesn't matter what you are. If you mess up, own it. Own yourself 100%. And that includes fully apologizing and committing to do better.
Beautiful words.
So that one I actually I owe that little mental breakthrough to a TED Talk, and I am going to mess up his name, so I'm looking it up right now. Radical Self-Ownership was the name, I think, of the TED Talk, and I will tell you in just a minute. Here we go. Jocko Willink is the name of the gentleman who gave the TED Talk. It was a TEDx for University of Nevada. Jocko, J-O-C-K, starting over, Jocko-Willink. And if you haven't had a chance to, that's the best 14 minutes of your time that you can ever spend listening to what Jocko has to say about radical self-ownership. It will free you. And he looks like a Jocko, by the way. He is a...
And he's got a cool name.
Oh, yeah, he's got a cool name. He is a... so he's, if I remember correctly, a retired Navy SEAL. Please don't beat me up, Jocko, if I got it wrong. But, Special Forces. And he actually talks about, in that TED Talk, a very emotional situation that resulted, unfortunately, in the deaths of two people and the injury of several others. But he uses this beautiful story that's also slightly horrifying that happened in Iraq to teach a very important lesson. And it's a lesson that we all need to apply to ourselves, especially when we have people who are trusting us to do what is best for them. At the end of the day, I can't say this enough, it's our responsibility. It is a responsibility that is heavier than the entire solar system and lighter than air, to take care of our clients and to treat them as we would treat ourselves. and even better than we would treat ourselves, because sometimes you folks don't do a very good job with your work-life balance, and you don't treat yourself very well. So maybe a little bit better. By the way, take care of yourself. But there you go. Well, Rich, is there any final thoughts that you want to share?
And you just kind of made me think of something that,
yes,
that golden rule was always something that I thought of, that I'd want to treat the kids that I work with the way that I would want others to treat me. And then it became kind of, the more I thought of it, it seemed a little self-centered, because like, you might not want to be treated the way that I want to be treated. And so it just gets back to like seeing these kids not with their labels or their diagnosis, but as a person, and I'm going to treat you the way that you show me that you want to be treated. And like, that's more important to me than treating you the way I want to be treated. Like, I want you to be treated the way that you want to be treated. And it's my job to discover how it is you want to be treated. And like, with the help of the people I work with and the parents, caregivers, other professionals, and the kid, if we can get everybody to treat that kid the way they want to be treated, then I think we've done a large part of our job.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, Rich, if somebody wanted to find you, especially since you're doing these lovely Zooms, where could they find you and Compass Therapeutic Services?
So they can go to our website, which is compasstherapeutic.net, or they can email me directly at rich, R-I-C-H, at compasstherapeutic.net. And whether you live in the East Bay or not, we're open to collaboration, and we'd love to hear from you. But I work with a great team, and the more trauma-informed care that we can put out there, the better. So if you want to reach me, that's how you can do it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Rich. Thank you, folks, for joining us here on OBehave. This is an open source education resource, which means that you are welcome to cut, reuse, reapply in any way, shape, or form, including for commercial purposes. The things that we record here, preferably not be commercial, because I want this information to be available for free. The only thing that's required is that you attribute back to this podcast so that folks can find it and so people can learn. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, and have a great day.